Central Time. And we have quite a few people on already, so I think we should get going.
Sounds good. We are recording and we are streaming also live on YouTube.
Wonderful. So very welcome to the July 2019 study group for the Ladies Be Architects. This month we are looking at sharing and visibility designer. The topic and category was chosen by our lovely community on our Trailblazer community group. And the topic that won was 3 sharing scenarios. Yay!
Woohoo!
I think that's one of the harder ones, right? But I'm very happy that Susannah is joining me today and presenting. So without further ado, I'm Charly Prinsloo. It's very nice to meet all of you. For those of you that I haven't met yet, I've got 16 certs. I've kind of been stuck on 16 now for about a year. I need to do a few more. I'm planning to do the Heroku Architect on Sunday. So fingers crossed I get that. I didn't pass the beta. It was really quite hard. But anyway, that's me. I live in Austin, Texas, and I work for a lovely Salesforce SI called SenseCorp. And then over to Susannah.
Yes, so my name is Susannah St. Germain, for those of you who I haven't met yet. I am 17 times certified and similar to Charly, working on the Heroku Architect certification next, although I am not looking to take it so soon. I think I'll probably take it in the next month or so. But I've been working with Salesforce from a perspective of a customer since 2011. And currently I am a technical architect at Boston Scientific. We're a medical device company based out of Boston. Surprise, surprise. And I just love learning new things. That's why I'm passionate about sort of the architect journey and planning my deadline for CTA to be around the beginning of 2020, and just love talking with you all about exam strategies and also things like clicks and also a bit of code. I noodle as a developer. I'm definitely not a full-time developer, but you know, sort of comes with the territory as far as being able to help troubleshoot things in my day-to-day job. So I love learning all the new sort of programmatic technologies. So that's me.
Thank you very much. And for those of you that don't know, we are very, very proud of Susannah. Susannah was awarded the Golden Hoodie at Trailhead DX just a few weeks ago. So very congratulations to you, Susannah. We're very, very proud of you, and you truly deserved it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right. Now it's over to our champions. Guys, it has been incredible. We haven't done a champion list for a while, so we've got quite a few. So we're highlighting all the spring and summer champions. Now, disclaimer, these are the champions that we know about that obtained their architect certifications or any of the domain certs. We kind of stalk you all on Twitter and in the community. And if we see you're saying, yay, I got it, we make a note of it. So if you're not on this list, it's not because we don't want to recognize you, it's just because we didn't know. We are working on a solution on how we can better track these things, but that's still in progress, and we'll keep you up to date.
Absolutely. And just one note too, we might be double recognizing some folks, and we'd rather do that than the other way around. So if you have already been recognized, happy to recognize you again. We're just making sure we're catching up on any folks that might have slipped through the cracks.
Absolutely. Another interesting thing you guys will notice, we have a champion for each one of the domain certifications. For every single certification that's in the architect triangle, we have someone, which is incredible.
Incredible.
If you think a year ago, we probably had like 1 or 2 people across all the domains every month, and now we have tens and tens of people. So our first bunch is Platform Developer 1, and we have Jolene White, Catherine Booth, Katrina Copeland, Lynn, Alison Park, and Stephanie Poorman. Congratulations.
Woohoo!
All right, Susannah.
Sure. I am very happy to recognize our platform app builder, Cynthia Thomas. I think she might have just joined, but a huge congrats to her for passing her platform app builder.
Wonderful. All right, next up is the Data Architecture and Management Designer exam. We've got Catherine, Kothai, and apologies if I just don't pronounce your name right. I'm trying here. Olga, Radhika, Jen, Sarah, and Stephanie. Congratulations.
Congrats, guys. And next up is Sharing and Visibility Designer. A lot of folks passed this one as well pretty recently. Huge congrats to Jeanette, Catherine, Michelle, Paulina, Amber, Sarah, and Stephanie. Way to go, guys.
Next up is Community Cloud Consultant. We've got Jolene, Laron, and Tammy. Congratulations to the three of you.
Next, this is a toughie, one of the ones that folks dread, but three really awesome champions passed this designer exam recently. Huge congrats to Samantha. I know you're on the call. Shruti and Allison.
Wonderful. And then Dev, Lifecycle and Deployment Designer, a whole 8 champions. Bhavana, Crystal, Jeanette, Louise, Maria, Shruti, Lynn, and Allison. Congratulations. Some of you ladies have been very busy.
I know, multiple, yeah. Some lots of familiar faces. Yeah, repeat passers.
All right, next up.
Okay, and this is the exam of all exams. This one's a really tough one, and we have an amazing 5 folks who passed it recently. So huge congrats to Crystal, Jeanette, Miriam, Nikki, and Samantha.
Well done, ladies. And now, drum roll. Susannah. Susannah got the Mobile Solutions Architecture Designer in the last month. Congratulations, Susannah.
Thanks. And I definitely recommend this one, you guys. It's, I think, one of the optional ones, but after your identity exam, it's really useful. So encourage you to tackle it.
All right.
Okay, up next. So we have an amazing 8 spring and summer domain architects. So our application architects that we'd love to recognize today: Amber, Cynthia, Jeanette, Catherine, Allison, and Stephanie. Huge congrats, you guys. This is a really big accomplishment, getting that first domain architecture cert. So way to go. Congratulations.
And on the other side of the triangle, the system architects. We've got 4, Jeanette, Miriam, Nikki, and Samantha. Guys, this is incredible to see how many of us are starting to complete the triangle. So big round of applause to everyone in our spring and summer certification champion list. Okay, next up, our agenda for today. We want to do sharing and visibility and talk about a different scenario. So we're going to spend some time setting the stage for today's scenarios, and then we're going to go through scenario 1, talk it through, unpack it, and then look at the overall solution for scenario 1 and do the same for scenario 2, 3. And then we've got some gotchas, some questions we want to throw out to you guys. Remember, this is a study group. This is not me and Susannah teaching. This is us studying and helping each other. So we want to hear you guys. Feel free to use the chat functionality or just unmute and ask a question. And then we've got some resources at the end that would be hopefully helpful to each one of you, not just preparing for the Sharing Visibility Designer certification, but also for the CTA board exam. So first up, I want to talk about our sharing toolkit. I draw this picture. It's one of my ugly pictures. I'm really good at drawing ugly pictures. But I draw this when I was starting to wrap my head around all the different things, all the different tools and aspects of sharing. And it gets confusing when you don't see a full picture, when you don't understand the whole scope of it. And I know there's like an upside down triangle floating about, showing us permissiveness and openness. But this one really helped me, and I hope you guys will find this helpful. When you think of your Salesforce org, you've got a couple of tools that you can use to help with sharing and visibility. On the outside, we have the org, and we've got 4 main tools when it comes to org access. Username and password. You can't access the org if you're not a user, if you don't have a password. Password policies, then login hours and login IP ranges. So those are your main core sharing and visibility, i.e. access tools for the org. Then on object level, the 2 main tools are profiles and permission sets. On record access, we've got a few more. We've got the org-wide defaults. We've got the role hierarchy that shares vertically. And then we've got 6 other tools that shares horizontally, and those are the owner-based sharing rules, the criteria-based sharing rules, groups, manual share, territory hierarchies, and teams. And manual, territory, and teams share vertically and horizontally. And then to give field access and visibility, you've got profiles and permission sets. Now, I know you're all thinking, oh, Charly, you forgot about Apex sharing. These are just the declarative tools. Apex sharing is a whole different layer that you can apply to each one of the blocks, the org, the object, the record, and the field. So I thought this was helpful, and we'll reference back to the toolkit, thinking what tools we will use when we try and solve a scenario. That's what I always do. When I look at a scenario and say, oh, you've got to do this and this and this, I always think, which one of my 16 tools will be able to help me do this? So let's see if we can pull that through to today. Over to you, Susannah.
Absolutely. So to set the stage, we're going to walk you through a couple slides that have maybe a familiar type scenario, you know, pretty dense, lots of different requirements. And then we're going to sort of together solve little individual pieces of it. So I'll start reading this high level scenario. So today, Sunflower Computing comprises of sales and service organizations. They have account management, contact management, opportunity management, and case management. So they would like this functionality to be deployed to users. And considering the functionality needed and the organization structure, administrators would like to set up application security to provide the right data visibility to the users. Next slide. Okay, so it's a little bit complex. They have sales and service teams that report to the CEO, and they have 15,000 direct sales representatives that are organized in a global hierarchy. They have an executive vice president of global sales, senior VPs in each of the major regions, divisional VPs who own each country's sales activities. And there are 127 countries that Sunflower Computing operates in. They also have district managers for each major territory and state in each country. There can be up to 30 territories per country with an average of 10. And then the sales reps that report to each district manager. Sales reps typically operate at a city or local region level. And sales reps at the city and local region level will own accounts and opportunities. And then reporting will roll up through their district managers up to the executive VP of sales. Sounds pretty easy, right? Pretty simple. There's more. So 10,000 channel representatives report to the executive VP of global sales and are organized by partner tiers, premium partners and resellers. There are over 500 service engineers that form customer service, and they're organized into 2 major product functions, hardware and software. And then each function has up to 25 specialty teams, and users can work in more than one specialty team. A team usually consists of 25 users. Then finally, channel reps will own partner accounts, and opportunities are only initially visible to the sales reps that own the opportunity.
So when I hear all of this, and you probably too, this is what I think. This is very similar to what you will get on a CTA exam, or when you're doing mock exams, or even in real life. And this is always my first reaction, because it is like, what did I just read? How would I process this? It's just so much information. So let's go and see if we can do this. You guys ready? Scenario 1, what we need to do is keeping the rep data secure. So they're asking us to solve these 3 things. Opportunities are initially only visible to the sales rep that owns the opportunity. Users in the sales organization, i.e. channel and direct sales reps, only have access to the accounts they own, as well as to the accounts that are owned by their subordinates. And users should have the same access to contacts as they do to the contact-related account. All right, knowing what we know and setting the stage, having these 3 requirements, how will we solve this? Let's unpack the first scenario. So the first line we read were opportunities are initially only visible to the sales rep that owns the opportunity. Now think of the toolkit: org access, object access, record access, and field access. So these are obviously object access, opportunities, and it's also record access. So which tool can we use? The first one I was thinking of is org by default. So if we make the org by default for opportunities private, will that solve this? Let's check. Opportunities are initially only visible to the sales rep that owns the opportunity. That should solve it, right? Because when an opportunity, where the org by default for an object is private, only the owner and anybody above them in the role hierarchy would be able to see those records. Susanna, you want to take this one?
I do. So Charly and I had a conversation about this scenario, actually, because what about the standard out-of-the-box relationships between accounts and opportunities? There's always these wrinkles, right? In any scenario we're working with Salesforce, sometimes things seem simple, like, okay, org wide default, opportunities, private, that makes sense. But what about things like implicit sharing? So we discussed a little bit about the ideas and had to look back at the documentation, because things like implicit sharing aren't things that you think about every day in real life necessarily. And looking at the documentation, sometimes, I'm sure that you all know as you've been studying for these exams, sometimes the documentation isn't that clear. But what we found, and actually confirmed by going through and creating the scenario in a developer org, because anytime I find the documentation sort of unclear, I'll go and actually try it and build it out and confirm sort of how I interpret the documentation. And what we found was that with implicit sharing, it actually only works child to parent. So if I open up access to an opportunity or open up access to a contact, for instance, implicit sharing behind the scenes in Salesforce opens up access to that account, but not necessarily, and I say necessarily because we'll sort of dive into a little bit of an exception, but it doesn't necessarily open up implicit sharing from parent, in this case account, to child, in this case opportunity. So that's a little wrinkle that we sort of talked through and tested through, but confirmed that our solution of org-wide default for opportunities being private technically solves this requirement.
Yes, absolutely. And I always get confused that it's not from parent to child. Implicit sharing is actually the other way around. It gives access to the parent if the user has access to the child. So that's something I always need to get my head around. All right, so the second aspect of scenario one was users in the sales organization, channel, and direct sales reps only have access to the accounts they own, as well as the accounts that are owned by their subordinates. So this again is about record access. Record access, what tools do we have? We have the org-wide default, we have sharing rules, we have, so org-wide default for accounts, if we make that private, then again, the owner and anybody above them in the role hierarchy should be able to access that. So org-wide default should be able to solve the scenario, right, Susanna?
Yep, and one caveat or note on that, you guys all probably know that you can also check that grant access via role hierarchy. So that's an important checkbox to remember to check when you're setting those org-wide defaults. And then you'll see these two little tidbits down here. One thing that you'll find if you're actually going through and setting up this scenario in your developer org is that if you try to set your account's access to private and your org-wide default for something like for opportunities or cases is anything other than private, so like read only or read write, you'll get this helpful little pop-up that says, hey, if you're trying to set your account org-wide default to private, you also need to set your opportunity access to private and your case access to private. And the system will actually update that for you before you can save your account access to private. So something good to know if you're working on preparing for your CTA exam. You're not going to see those pop-ups, right, when you draw your org-wide defaults in your scenario. So it's something to remember that if accounts are private, opportunities and cases have to be as well.
And also remember, the grant access via role hierarchy checkmark for each one of the objects are automatically ticked for standard objects, and it cannot be changed. It can only be changed for custom objects. That's always important to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, then the third part of scenario one was users should have the same access to contacts as they do to the contacts related account. So if we, again, on record access, change the org-wide default for contacts to controlled by parent, we should be able to solve this. Right, Susanna?
Absolutely. And going back to the previous slide where we said we were going to set up a role hierarchy and provide access to accounts via roles that we set up. One important thing to note, so we mentioned that implicit sharing only goes child to parent, not parent to child. But there is sort of, I wouldn't call it implicit sharing, but it's implicit sharing like behavior that happens when you set up roles, depending on how you set up those roles. So you can see on the right side of the screen, when we are building out a role hierarchy, it gives you options to set the opportunity access and case access in different ways. And if you set sort of, it's hard to see on the slide, but you can see the third option, for instance, is users in this role can edit all opportunities associated with the accounts that they own, regardless of who owns the opportunity. So in this scenario that we're solving for, if I had set up my roles and checked or picked that radio button that says users in the role can edit all opportunities regardless of who owns the opportunity, then we're not necessarily meeting that first requirement we had of opportunities being only shared to their owner. So there are these, I would almost say, these guardrails or these choices we need to make along the way as we're setting up different tools in the toolbox that we need to refer back to the requirements and make sure that we're choosing the right option. I know sometimes when I'm working in my dev org or going through a Trailhead module, I sort of ignore these settings. They say just click next and next, but these choices that you make have really important effects on the sharing settings of the solution that you're designing. So it's really important to read through these all and understand them.
Absolutely. So that was scenario one. That wasn't so bad, guys. Once you start unpacking it and you know what's in your toolbox, it's not that bad. So Susanna, take scenario two for us.
Absolutely. So scenario two is around roll-ups, how information is being rolled up into our role hierarchy. So first requirement is direct sales reporting needs to roll up from the district manager to the executive VP of sales. Channel sales reporting rolls up by partner tier to the executive VP of sales. And then customer service engineers roll up by product function, example, hardware and software. There is no requirement to roll up reporting from specialty teams to the product function level. So knowing what we know about from our setup and reading through these requirements, we can start to unpack them bullet by bullet. So the first bullet, direct sales reporting needs to roll up from the district manager to the executive VP of sales. So unpacking this, knowing about the tools in our toolbox, this roll up of information is likely going to be solved by role hierarchy. So how do we set up our role hierarchy? How do we start to think through all of those roles that were listed in the initial setup? So we know that sales and service report to the CEO. So we have three nodes essentially. We don't maybe know the specifics, but we have three nodes of the role hierarchy that we know we're going to need to illustrate in our design. CEO, sales, and service. And if we go down and read through the bullets from the original requirements, we start to get some more detail. So we know that sales is actually the executive vice president of global sales. So we can go ahead and update that sales to EVP of global sales. Going further, we have some more information. So we know that the senior VPs of each major region roll up to the EVP. So we can start to write these out. And when we get a big juicy scenario like this, oftentimes we would want to model out examples of the roles, but not necessarily every single region, for instance, or not every single country. You would give an example like we've done here. So APAC, EMEA, and AMER. And then going down even further, we can see that now divisional VPs of each region roll up to the senior VPs. So we can do sort of an example of that. In America, we can see that there's USA and then also Canada VPs that would roll up to the senior VP. Okay, so our role hierarchy is starting to look pretty good, pretty robust. And now we can go down to the district managers. So this is the nitty gritty of each manager who owns a territory or state in each country. And we can see that they're 30 per country with an average of 10, but again, we can just model out an example. So in this example, we're using district manager North, Central, and West Coast. Okay, So our sales is rounding out with our sales reps at the very bottom of the role hierarchy. And this is another tip. Typically, you wouldn't want to build out for every single territory or country, but you do want to make sure that you're solving from the lowest level of the role hierarchy to the top. So our lowest level sales reps report up to our district manager and operate at the city or local region. So in our example, Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. Awesome. So our sales role hierarchy is looking pretty good, right, Charly?
Yes, and let's just always check back to see if we've met our requirement. So our requirement said that the direct sales reporting needs to roll up from the district manager to the EVP of sales. So we've got from our sales rep all their data, because they'll be owning the opportunities, remember? Their data will roll up into their district managers, which will roll up into the divisional vice presidents, into the senior vice presidents for each one of the major regions, and then into the global EVP of sales. So I think it does, because we think when that grant access through role hierarchy is automatically checked on opportunities because it's a standard object, and we've got a role hierarchy that enables that subordination data to roll up to the person above them in the food chain.
Okay.
I think we're good on this one. Let's go.
Great.
And I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to the little arrows, but they're all skew, but never mind, right? We all got
None of us are perfect.
So yes, sales reps at the city or local region level will own their accounts and opportunities. And then reporting will roll up through the district manager up to the executive vice president of sales. So we're meeting that requirement by building this role hierarchy.
Awesome. So we've talked about our internal users, right? Our sales reps and managers and VPs. But if you remember, there was a requirement around channel sales reporting up to partner tier and then ultimately to the VP of sales. So usually when we talk about channel sales or resellers, we start to delve into the realm of external users. So we know that there's 10,000 channel reps that need to report up ultimately to the global VP of sales, and they're organized in tiers, premium partners, and resellers. So let's start to draw that out. So we know that we have our internal model, we have our CEO, and we have our VP of global sales. But what happens next with these external users? So we have a theory around this, and I don't know, Charly, if you want to go into it, but there's unique roles around external users that it's important to know in order to design a solution properly.
Yes, absolutely. And this is the actual documentation from Salesforce, and that's why it's important to understand these things when you're studying for this. So when you enable the first external user on a partner account, a user role hierarchy is automatically created for that account. So this role hierarchy then rolls up to the account owner. That's so important. And that account owner would typically be the channel manager. So when you're architecting, you need to remember that the partner accounts need to be owned by somebody that's going to end up being their manager or their the roll-up role for those partner users. So when this automatic role hierarchy is created for that specific partner account, there are 3 roles that are being created: the partner user, the partner manager, and the partner exec. Now, there's quite a few rules regarding what happens if you delete the partner manager role or the partner executive role. And it's important to go read that and learn that. But for this example, we just need to know that those 3 roles are automatically created by Salesforce when you activate an account as a partner. So these partner user roles is a subordinate of the account owner's role. So all data for the partner user role rolls up to the partner account owner role. Partner account, so think of the account for the partner and who owns that account. And typically, as they said, that would be a channel manager. So we know that in the scenario, they're asking us 2 tiers, premium partners and reseller partners. So we need to put into our internal org role hierarchy a channel manager for premium partners and a channel manager for reseller partners, and led that role into the EVP of global sales and then into the CEO.
Absolutely.
I think we've met that scenario. So it's important, really important to remember the theory behind partner users. Right, Susannah?
Okay, let's keep going with the scenario 2. So our third bullet, I believe, is around customer service. So the requirement is that customer service engineers roll up product by function, so like hardware and software. And there's no requirement to roll up reporting from specialty teams to the product function level. So that's still a lot of information, so let's unpack it a little bit. So we recall from our initial scenario that there are over 500 service engineers that are part of customer service. And again, that they roll up into major product functions, hardware and software. Okay, so how do we start to solve for that? We know that we have the CEO in our role hierarchy. And now in complement to our sales, we need to start to build out our service role hierarchy. So let's get going. For service, we know that there's two major product lines. There's hardware and there's software. And in our requirements, we know that there's a service manager under each product. Diving a little bit deeper, we know that reporting to that service manager, there is a service engineer, and that information should roll up to their manager. And same thing on the software side. And it looks like we have a small typo here. Service engineer software would roll up to the service manager software, just not to create any confusion. And no worries. And yes, so we'll correct that when we share that out. But looking at the requirements, Charly, I think we've met this customer service requirement. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they did say there's no requirement to roll up the reporting from the specialty teams to the product function level. So we're good if we can just roll up the 500 service engineers that are split into hardware and software into the EVP. I assume it's going to be EVP of service that reports to the CEO.
Awesome.
All right. Scenario 3. Now we need to continue keeping the reps' data secure. So what do we need to solve here? Sunflower Computing service engineers can create cases on behalf of customers for servicing the products that they've purchased. So I imagine somebody phoning in saying, oh, my computer is broken. And then the service engineer can create that case for them. Cases are visible to the team by default, but will only be visible to the case owner and their manager once assigned. Cases are initially owned by a specialty team, but can be assigned to an individual case owner. And when a case is initially created, it will be assigned to members of that specialty team based on the combination of type and subtype. Okay, they've lost me already. I think I'm stopped understanding by the second sentence. So let's unpack this.
Yes, so go dive into bullet 1. So Sunflower Computing Inc. service engineers can create cases on behalf of customers for servicing the products that they have purchased. And still, that's a mouthful. But what we need to focus on is the second sentence. So cases are visible to the team by default, but will only be visible to the case owner and their manager once assigned. So we know one thing, right? So again, anytime someone shouldn't see something, if there's anyone who shouldn't see a record, then OWD needs to be private, and then we need to open up access the other way. So in this case, the case object OWD will be private.
Does this solve a requirement, Susannah? So if a case object is private, the case object by default is private, and a service engineer creates the case on behalf of the customer. That means it's the service engineer seeing that, right?
Right. And so this doesn't quite completely solve it, right? Because we have a second requirement where they're visible to the team and to the manager once they're assigned.
That's right. Now, sometimes, and this is a good example of this, you wouldn't know, you'd be kind of sort of, I don't have enough information to solve the second part, because at this moment, I just know that service engineers create them. I'm not sure what these teams are. And quite often later in your scenario, you'll find the information you need to come solve your requirement. So if you don't, sometimes you get a requirement and you don't have all the information, then it's the only thing you can do is make some assumptions. But in this case, let's proceed to the second requirement and see if it doesn't help us solve the first one.
So the second requirement is cases are initially owned by a specialty team, but can be assigned to an individual case owner. Okay, so we're getting a little more information now. We know that we're also working with cases. So cases have some special magic around them that other things don't, things like opportunities. So The approach that we would recommend is using queues for the specialty teams so that you can automatically assign a case based on certain criteria to a group of users. And then also, once you get more information about the case, perhaps assign a case to an individual case owner.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that gave this away is that the minute it says a record needs to be owned by more than one person, like a team, queues are usually the only tool in our tool belt that can do that. So you can create a queue and add members to that queue. And that means that more than one person can own a record at the same time using queues. And that's how these cases can be owned by the specialty teams. All right, so I want to jump back to our first requirement. Cases are visible to the team by default. Does queues solve this? Yes. And then the second part was, but will only be visible to the case owner and their manager once assigned. So if somebody takes ownership of a case from a queue, that means that individual becomes the case record owner. And because cases is a standard object, and because the grant access through the role hierarchies is automatically checked on a standard object, it means that the manager of the case owner will automatically have visibility to that record as well. So I think we're good on requirement 1 and requirement 2 for scenario 3. All right, Susannah?
Sure. So our final, I think this is our final requirement, is when a case is initially created, it will be assigned to members of that specialty team based on the combination of type and subtype. So we need something in between sort of the creation of the case and when it gets assigned. We need to have a way to automate that. So the solution in this case is going to be case assignment rules, because we know that we can use case assignment rules to route the proper owner of the case based on specific criteria. So when the case has maybe a combination of type and subtype, it's automatically going to go to this customer service queue. And when it has a different combination, it will automatically be routed to another. And typically, just again, a best practice is you should always have sort of a if then, and then have an else condition, so that if the combination for whatever reason doesn't meet the assignment rules that you have set up, that it goes to maybe a default queue or an other queue, so that cases aren't being sort of abandoned out there and not having an owner just because maybe someone made had a field blank or just created a new combination.
Yes, absolutely. So case assignment rules aren't really in our sharing visibility toolkit, but these are special functionality that exists on the lead and case objects. So assignments, escalations, helps us to manage the process automation surrounding those two service objects. And yes, did you know queues are available for cases, contact requests, leads, orders, service contracts, and knowledge article versions, and of course, any custom object that you create. So always remember to use your queues, because queues as well as teams are a really great tool in your sharing toolkit.
Great. So we've gone through the nitty-gritty of unpacking a lot of these particular requirements, and these next two slides are just sort of a high-level view of the final solution. And frankly, I don't think this shows as much information, right, as going through the nitty-gritty. But what you would see at the end is that, yes, we determined that our account or wide defaults were going to be private, right? We confirmed that that met our requirements with a combination of role hierarchy. We also determined that our contact should be controlled by parent. So that the requirement to have contact sharing be controlled by account, again, that met our requirements that we were given. And then finally, opportunity and case. Luckily, the private model of opportunity and case met our requirements, because right when our account model is private, opportunities and cases org-wide defaults need to be private.
I just switched back to into out of presentation mode, because I wanted to quickly go back to our setting the stage slides. Remember that feeling when we read through this? When we saw all these requirements, it was 3 slides of solidly packed text, and we read it and we felt like poor Kevin in Home Alone. But by unpacking it in a 30-minute time frame, we were able to come up with a really elegant way of solving each one of those requirements in details. And that's kind of all I wanted to do by jumping back and just reminding you.
Absolutely. And then, yes, so this is, again, just like how you might represent your role hierarchy that we did in the slide, sort of like a draw-out model. This is another way of representing that flow of role hierarchy that you could put into something like Excel if you wanted to.
So when you just think about your artifacts, when you're producing artifacts as an architect in your day-to-day job, or when you're going for the CTA review board, as Susannah previously said, it's not always possible to draw out every single permutation of every single role. We just heard that Sunflower Computing Inc. has like 10 possible towns or regions within their global regions, and in their country regions, and then into their global regions. So this could be absolutely huge. A great way to indicate that is to put a legend on your role hierarchy and give it a color code. So the roles that you've drawn out and defined, make that one color, and then just show kind of a ... notation where you would want to show similar roles would exist based on the example that you've already drawn out. That way you're covered in all ways. Just make sure that you do it correctly.
Awesome. So I think that
yeah,
we've solved for the solution. Yeah, and this is, and again, this text is lifted from a great resource that's on the Sharing and Visibility Trail Mix about considerations. I think sometimes some of like the huge list of considerations that they provide, you can get lost in it, but I think that we pared down these, and these are some really good considerations to think about, and that we thought about bullet by bullet. You know, who are the different actors? Are the customer service versus the sales? You know, are there going to be both internal and external users, like our channel sales, and knowing the sharing impacts of those and the different sharing tools that you have for internal versus external users. And then a lot of the usual suspects, so things like, you know, what data sets need sharing, what's going to be the OWD for your objects, and then things like ownership. So knowing that nuance around our partner users, and that our channel manager is going to ultimately be that owner of the account, and how that's going to influence our external sharing. And then knowing the different approaches, right? There's role hierarchy, there's territory management, there's, you know, lots of different tools in our tool belt. So knowing the approaches and being able to choose the most, and I would say usually the simplest approach should be one that's at least evaluated. So definitely knowing those different tools to achieve the end goal is very important.
And then things that you need to think about when you're also designing is, you can have questions like, but when do I consider Apex sharing? When do I recommend manual sharing? When do I start exploring things like ETM, enterprise territory management? And what other tool belts, what other tools do we have in our tool belts when we have to think about the complexity of sharing our data model and our org with our users and external users? Susannah?
Absolutely. So there are things like Apex sharing, you know, from my perspective, and again, Charly, please weigh in with yours, but, you know, I would say definitely try to rule out your out-of-the-box or declarative sharing options before considering Apex sharing. But as we all know, there are just some scenarios where it can't be met with declarative solution. But I do think it's important to note that there's a difference between sort of a large use case that needs to be solved for with maybe a custom approach versus an edge case. And an edge case to me would be, you know, if there's this one rep out in California who needs to have this certain sharing model that maybe diverges. And I would say even if it's between like a 1% and 5%, not just one user, but say it's like a 3% of your users have this use case, I still consider that to be an edge case. So is that a scenario where you can recommend manual sharing instead of having it completely automated? And then for enterprise territory management, usually my take is if you have a scenario where your system of record, for instance, we use SAP for our system of record, and we need to have the ability to have our users in more than one quote unquote role. So, you know, when we set up role hierarchy, it's a one-to-one match between a user and a role. If you need to have a user that manages multiple territories, that might start to get into a good use case for enterprise territory management.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now we've said quite enough. Now it's time for you guys to ask any questions. Susanna, do you know if there's any questions in the meeting? Oh, there's lots of comments.
Let me take yeah, there's lots of comments. I don't see no questions yet, but if anyone wants to type their question in or unmute themselves, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I have a question here that we have also talked about group, and I think we can also include groups at certain stage for sharing when we talk about sharing with a set of people. So instead of queue, we can also use group, and we can define a sharing rule so that certain data can be shared with that group instead of having a queue, because queue does not work on several standard objects.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Groups are a very important tool in our toolkit. And groups, public groups are so versatile because you can not just add individual people into it, but you can add roles and subordinates, as well as other public groups. So you can create really creative, complicated groups to exactly do that. Use that in your sharing rules, both your owner-based and criteria-based sharing rules, in your team, so that you can share it out to the right people. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Hi, and this is Madhu. I have a question. So we have a scenario where we are implementing distributor communities and then enabling external sharing to all our distributors. So the use case is we have a parent account and who is the parent distributor, and under that distributor we have a number of retailers, and the retailers have sub-retailers. So parent distributor should be able to have visibility to all the retailer accounts and also the sub-retailer accounts in the community. So I'm trying to build a criteria-based sharing rule here, but that's only letting me share up to one level, like the parent and the child relationship. So I'm not able to reach to the second level where the retailer, sub-retailer accounts are visible. So one solution is to go with Apex sharing, but I don't want to go with Apex sharing. So is there any other solution to this use case?
I think it's kind of, I feel like Kevin in Home Alone. It's kind of hard to without knowing all the information.
I know. So I tried to summarize it, but then so the information is like maybe parent account distributor 1 is the high level account. Yeah, parent account distributor 1, and under that I have retailer accounts who are tied to this distributor account, and then under the retailer account I have sub retailers.
So are these all using the account object? All of these?
They're all using account objects, and we are using account hierarchy.
Okay, and these distributors, would they be partner accounts?
Yes, they are partner accounts. That's correct.
So if we think about our theory, if you convert this partner account or this account and create the partner users, they will automatically be created a role hierarchy for this account, right? So there'll be a distributor 1 role hierarchy, which means that they will have access through the Salesforce sharing model to this account and to any child account.
So all these are defined as private at the org level. So unless I open up, I don't think they have access. So I've verified in the system. So the org level access is private.
So even if an account or by default is private, a distributor one partner user should be able to see all the retailer accounts and the sub-retailers. Are the retailer accounts also partner accounts?
But this is for the external visibility, right? So if I converted all of these as partner accounts, as you said, all the contacts linked to the parent account dist1. I converted all the contacts into partner contacts and tried logging in as a contact, and then I'm not able to access the sub retailers. So you're saying by default with the role hierarchy, they should be able to access those accounts?
This relationship between these accounts, is that using the out of the box parent account relationship, or is this a customer?
Yes, out of the box parent account relationship.
And
I also tried using criteria based sharing between the parent and the retailer account. So in the community settings, I put in a sharing rule where it says, okay, if the child is related to the parent, then have account access opened up.
And what is your security setting for the external context? Like, do you have your internal sharing setting for your account is private? Is your external sharing setting the same?
External sharing is also private because I don't want one distributor to have visibility to other distributor accounts.
Yeah, you're right. And it would have to be, private anyway. Yep.
If this is taking longer time, maybe I don't want to take up everyone's time here. I can email you and we can take it offline.
Yes, absolutely. We'd be happy to try and figure this out with you.
Definitely.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Anybody else?
Hey, hi, this is the Daneshwar here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. So I would say we should cover one scenario or the concept of if we make the profile like a profile setting, modify all data or modify all, then it would override that OWD or sharing rule or the access that we give to the accounts or the object. So maybe we can have discussion about that as well, because that also.
So you said if somebody has a modifiable access to an object permission on their profile, right? Hello?
In that case, yeah. So that would override any sharing settings, right? And you can see, like, when you go to, I think if you go to a specific, you can go and see like which users sort of supersede like sharing settings for like sharing rules and things like that. If you go to a particular object, and it actually lists out like the profiles or the of those users who are sort of superseding whatever sharing is in place. But is there any other? Is there any other concern you had around that, or question around that, or just clarifying that for folks so they understand?
No, just clarifying that.
Okay.
Just clarifying that. And one suggestion, maybe you will include that in the next sessions about team sharing, account team and opportunity team sharing.
Yes.
So that is good point to discuss.
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. There's a few things that we didn't cover in today's scenario, but we only have so much time. But things like the territory hierarchy, teams, we didn't really talk about groups. And then the new way to think about profiles and permission sets. There's some new developments coming from Salesforce under Safe Harbor, and what I understand it's going to call permission set groups or something. So there's a couple of app-based methodology on how to use profiles and permission sets that we can also dig into on a next session.
Definitely. That's a good one.
So the other thing we need to remember, guys, to go and vote on our Trailblazer community for our study sessions. It's ultimately you guys that decide what we're studying together every month. So if you want to do sharing and visibility again, let's go vote for it and add the comments and add topics that you want us to cover in our subsequent study sessions.
Sorry to disturb you. Sorry to interrupt you guys, but I have one more suggestion. I'm like, we can like probably have a good session on like the external user sharing, And the second would be the best approach when we are like troubleshooting a kind of a sharing scenario. Because recently I was like troubleshooting some of the sharing scenarios. Okay, so if we can have like a good best approach, how we need to proceed in terms of fixing these
Yes,
sharing
absolutely.
issues.
Maybe like top 5 things you do when you have a sharing issue, things you can think of, and a little checklist just to make it easier so you know where to start at least.
Yeah, because I'm like I'll end up in an issue wherein like one particular account is being accessed by a particular person, but as per all the sharing rules, it should not be. But when I dig into this particular sharing part, I got an information that there is some setting or implicit access allows that thing. So that's I think that I'm like, if you can go into the best practices, it'll help us in terms of like reducing the time
Definitely.
troubleshooting those kind of issues.
That's wonderful.
Great.
I love these things. You must come up with more. But I think we're running out of time. So Susanna, let's close up so we make sure we cover everything.
Yes. So
I'm so sorry to interrupt you guys once again, but last and only the last thing, that if you guys can like share the best resources from where we can read about all these topics, it'll be easy for us, because sometimes when we are like searching on Google, we might end up in those places where we have incomplete information, except Trailblazers, except the places we have. So if you can like suggest few things.
Definitely. And you did a great segue for us actually. And this isn't, we can put together a more comprehensive list. Exactly. But we put together some great resources that are some of our favorite sharing resources that are out there that are vetted and correct. And there's a link to some sharing and visibility exam tips. We have a lot of tips on our website as well that I can do a plug for, I think, on the next slide. So definitely check out all of these great resources. I particularly like the first one on that page. And then we have tons of, that's fine, Charlie. We have tons of other resources around this exam, sharing and visibility, as well as all of the other exams on the Ladies Be Architects website, www.arcladies.com. Also, please, if you haven't already, join our Trailblazer community. That's, as Charlie mentioned, where we vote for our monthly study groups, both the exam topic, but also the content. Like if you want to have another session like this where we're sharing like solutioning, or if you want to have that like top 5 tips for how to approach a sharing architecture, we can list out all of those topics and then you can vote on them to make sure that you are getting the content that you want. And then finally, if you tweet, please tweet with us, tweet to us, use the hashtag LadiesBeArchitects or hashtag Journey to CTA, and please mention @ArcLadies.
Yes, absolutely. Just one of the links we didn't put on here, but it's accessible from our website, is our YouTube channel. There are lots and lots and lots of hours worth of study groups like this, and led by other Ladies Be Architect members. It's invaluable resources. So please go make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and so you don't miss any of our videos that we post. Also, please get involved. We love having you as part of our community. There's no official way to sign up to our community or to join, and you won't get a membership card, but you'll get lots of Ohana love. Just go join our Trailblazer community group. That's all you need to do. You don't have to be a lady to do it. You can be a man as well. And how can you get involved? Come run a study group for us, please. I think you guys get tired of just listening to me and Susanna and Gemma every month. We like to hear other people and how they would run a study group. It's not you teaching, it's us studying together. Come tell us your member story. We've seen all the champions this month and this last spring. We want to hear your stories and your journeys. And come and meet us at our sessions. We try to be in as many places as we can be. And then we also have a swag store. What would we be without some swag? We have t-shirts, and we've just launched our latest t-shirt, and it says, I took the CPA exam and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. It's a great, it seems to be a big hit. So please come and support us and get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to attend. We will be posting the recording of this on our website, and we hope to see you next month.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining. We love speaking to you today, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.